right. Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host, Nika Sherrill, and this is the ItCast Real Talk on Sex. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that aims to increase diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This weekend, I will be speaking at the Love Skills Conference. Join me on January 22nd for a conversation on creating authentic intimacy, healing your relationship to shame. Love Skills is a weekend conference. Is a weekend conference hosted by Four Love Parties. You can learn more at fourloveparties.com and use the discount code NIKA50 at checkout to get 50% off of your registration. Also, this event is no one turned away for lack of funds. This March, we will be hosting the second iteration of the Power of Touch Healing and Pleasure series with Mutime Mani. And you can support the ItCast and all of the work that we do by visiting theitcast.com, subscribing to this YouTube channel, and sharing with your community. All right, now let's dive in. This week's topic is Real Talk on Medical Racism. Today in the booth, we have Dr. Day. Dr. Day is the CEO and founder of IWokeWellness. After seeing firsthand how systemic racism affects us all, they have been devoted to spreading wellness within communities. They are Afro-Latina, a former EMT, psychologist, and well on their way to becoming a doctor of chiropractic. Yes, Dr. Day, welcome to the show.
Well, just to clarify, I'm a physiologist and I'm a psychologist, and I am a doctor, so I am a doctor of chiropractic.
Oh, excellent. I think we pulled that from your bio. My apologies. Yes. Okay. So, Dr. Day, tell us a little bit more about yourself to give us that full context.
Yeah, so I'm a San Francisco native from San Francisco, California, and just being multicultural. I grew up with my grandparents being Jamaican and Guatemalan. And I remember as a child taking my grandparents to the doctors a lot and just seeing kind of their interactions and just kind of wondering there's something going on here. There's a lack of care. There's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of communication. There's just so much lacking. And when I was going through high school at John O'Connell in San Francisco, I realized how deeply how much lack there was in the community. And I decided I wanted to start giving back and working in my community. So I became a GED tutor. And then from there, I decided to become an EMT. That ended up leading me on the route to become a physiologist. And then while I was majoring in undergrad in physiology, I minored in health science with the emphasis on medical racism. And that just really opened up my eyes working in the profession in emergency medicine, as well as getting a degree with the science, but then also the statistics behind the treatment of people of color was just like mind blowing to me, because it was something I knew, but it was having that validation and that confirmation where I was like, okay, this is real. This is really real. Like, what can I do to start changing this? And that's when I developed IWokeWellness, and just really been heavily involved within activism as well as different community events and involvement to bring the collective together to start promoting wellness and empowerment and wellness.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. I feel like it's one of those things that as people of color, we can feel viscerally in our bodies when we go into these medical institutions. And, hearing that and knowing that there are people out there doing the research, studying, making a difference in this area is really huge, really huge. So you mentioned your activism. Can you talk a little bit more about how this correlates to the medical world and the things that you've done?
Yeah, so I think the biggest realization that came for me is the social determinants of health. And then those are actually known as, in America, we have a health to wealth gradient system. So the insurance companies with 99.9% accuracy based on your income and your zip code can tell you what you're going to die from and when, with 99.99% accuracy. And that blew my mind, that there are people out there that have this knowledge, but instead of doing things to empower people to live longer and get healthier, we're raising premiums and prices instead. And that just did not sit with me. As I started diving deeper into ethnic studies, I really understood how much systematic racism really does play a role. I understood it. Don't get me wrong, I've lived through it, but it's just, once you get into that deeper level of understanding, it's like, oh, dang, I'm being impacted on economic, social, class, education, nutrition, health, like it's literally any single facet of my life has been structurally disenfranchised. And I was like, okay, well, like, what can we really do about this? Because to shift up society and change things, like, that's a revolution, you know, like that's a lot of work in itself. And hopefully it does happen. But from now till then, it really starts with self. So just really tapping into self and finding ways that you can empower yourself and just kind of decolonize that and starting to find ways we can decolonize our wellness and understanding what's truly our healing modalities and what aren't our healing modalities, and just kind of going through that and culminate and see how it works, because medical racism is affecting so much in America. And that's why me and my organization group known as 4HD, we're a collective of Bay Area and San Francisco natives, promoting change within Black Lives Matter. And we broke down Black Lives Matter into 6 points of disenfranchisement: police brutality, economics, lack of inclusion within tech spaces, especially being in San Francisco, that's a huge thing, food disparities, medical racism, as well as housing. So with those 6 points, we all have our different points that we work a little bit deeper in. My points of focus are medical racism as well as food disparities. And with my time working as an EMT, my time becoming a chiropractor, becoming a physiologist, and truly understanding the psychology behind it and where the figures and numbers are at, it like really took me back. And there's so many things that we need to change within the system, but the first change starts within ourselves, unfortunately, because the system wasn't made for us. So we need to go ahead and find different ways that we can elevate through that. Yeah. And that's where I created IWokeWellness.
Awesome. Thank you. You know, it really trips me out. When I was in high school, I'm pretty good at math. I'm stellarly good at math. And my mom was like, you should be an actuary. And I was like, what's that? And they were like, oh, it's the person who determines when people are going to die. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I had no idea that zip code was factored into that context. What was it?
I was going to say, because I think that's the part I totally forgot to touch on, the health to wealth gradient, because it comes to your income. So it's like based on what your income is your life expectancy in America. And with America spending the most money on healthcare out of any other country in the world, why are our rates of death are amongst third world countries? That makes no sense. And it's just like our whole system literally does not make sense. We do not have a preventative healthcare model. We have a oops, hope shit doesn't happen model.
Right.
And then if it does, yikes, you know? And that's not how our society should be. And with understanding that this knowledge is out there, with knowledge being power, why aren't we taking that power to empower ourselves? So just like adding on to that, and then it comes back into economics, what ties back into the disenfranchisement and social structures, because typically people of color are earning less than white people in America, which means we're living shorter amount of times.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone in the chat wrote, being poor is expensive always, which is, yeah. Yeah. The less you have set up, and like initially, the harder and more expensive they make it for you to get out of that circumstance. You also mentioned our death rates are of those in third world countries, and pointing to the work that you're doing with Black Lives Matter, the food disparities and the housing disparities, like those things I look at, and like I live in the Bay Area and we have shanty towns. Like there are people living outside because of the income gap in this country. And in my perspective and opinion, that is actually what makes a third world country, is the income gap. So we are sliding rapidly in that direction. And I don't think a lot of people get that.
No, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I think people don't understand. And that's where zip code comes to play such a huge role, because if you divide San Francisco up into all of our zip codes, there's certain zip codes where you're going to have that $10 million house. Then you're going to have other zip codes where honestly the houses in those zip codes are still $1 million in San Francisco. Still wild to me. But it's like different way of living, where it's like you're living on one side of the city, you have to worry about getting robbed going to your car, getting like something happening XYZ, versus on the other side of the city, you're like, I could run at 3:00 in the morning with my dog and be perfectly okay. So right. It's that level of stress, less like lack of stress, what adds to life value expectancy, and just also to like the privilege to go outside of your home and exercise. Exercise is really important to adding value into your life. But if you're in a situation where you're constantly stressed out, you're unable to exercise, and you're always in survival mode, your body's not going to thrive like that. And that starts deducting from your life.
Yeah. I love that you created that picture around the different zip codes. I'm not going to lie. I know we're talking about a bunch of stuff that people of color or, get disempowered in. And I don't like the census.
I don't either.
Yeah. Like it divides us, it breaks us down into these components. And what people tend to think is, oh, poor neighborhoods or neighborhoods of color, they're more violent. And what is actually happening is, based on the census, resources are not actually being put into these neighborhoods to do any type of reparative work. So it's deep and it's insidious. So let's talk about more disparities when it comes to medical field. I know that there are some details that we get to dive into.
Yeah. I think like the biggest part is getting more people of color to actually go become providers, because in chiropractic school, the profession of chiropractic is only 1% Black and 3% Latino. And when you go into the medical doctors, physicians, it's the same thing. It's 1% Black and about 4% Latino. So finding doctors that resonate with you, that look like you, and being able to build up that trust in the rapport, it's very difficult. And I think being fortunate enough to live in a city like San Francisco, where there is so much diversity, I'm able to find that access a little bit easier. And even still, it's still hard to find that. I still haven't been able to find a PCP of color in San Francisco that I can get into, because the wait lists out here are crazy. But it's just like things like that, where I feel like you go into a smaller town, it's even harder to find people. So I think that would be another like huge thing, is getting more providers of color into the profession as well. And also educating the profession about these things too, because I actually led some seminars in chiropractic school about the topic of medical racism and bridging the gap in chiropractic. And for me as a person of color, this was like, this information, it's nothing new. But when chiropractic, the profession itself, is about 95% white, and you're giving this talk in front of the profession, for me, like, it was a little like, okay, is it going to be understood what's going on? And the feedback I got was, this is the first time a lot of these people had ever heard this information. And for some people, like, they're like, wow, like, these are things I need to be mindful of, like things I can focus to shift and change. And I was like, wow, that's really beautiful. There's other people who are like, yeah, not my problem, really don't care. And that's real. And we have to be mindful of that. There really are providers out there that just, it is what it is.
They're just sitting through an HR meeting, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you touched on trust in the medical field, and I definitely can we get into that?
No, because trust is huge. Like, you have to build up trust with your patient. And that's the one thing, is the medical model has treated Black people as science experiments, as we've seen with the Tuskegee studies. Like, I'm sure there's so many of us who have personal stories of our family members either being killed by the healthcare profession, being misdiagnosed, giving false information. Like for my grandmother, she was diagnosed with liver cirrhosis about 18 years ago. And they didn't tell us until she was 6 months away from hospice. And they're like, well, you didn't know she had liver cirrhosis? They're like, you should have kept up with her doctor's appointments. I went to every single one of her doctor's appointments, and none of them did they ever say her liver was off. So it's just like situations like that. It's like, it breaks down the trust that we have for the system, because it wasn't made for us. And then getting into the Latino side of it too, back in the 90s when the Clinton administration was around, they actually gave the power to emergency medical technicians to make the decision if your patient was undocumented, if you took them to ICE or if you took them to the emergency room. And then upon arrival at the emergency room, it's now the providing physician's decision to either report the patient to ICE or to provide care. And that's why different cities, especially San Francisco being one, is a sanctuary city where we don't report. But with that amount of power, a lot of people were trusting the healthcare profession, their family member having a heart attack or whatever the situation may be. And instead of them getting care, they're getting deported. You know, it's just, you get so afraid to go to the doctor because you don't know if they're like, what's going to happen. And by building up that fear, a lot of preventable diseases, if we're able to get checkups beforehand, could be preventable by the time we go in for treatment. But there's no trust there to make it happen. So it becomes like this seesaw of like what needs to happen and then what's truly happening. So it's like there's a need for change within our healthcare system. And that's why I think empowering each other and empowering self and wellness is so important, because you have to be your biggest advocate in the system.
Yeah, you have.
That just comes down to.
Yeah, I was having a conversation about, you know, like having the lungs checked. I was talking to my mom and she's like, I don't want to have my lungs checked. Like, I'll be fine. Like, they're not hurting. I'll be fine. And I was like, well, by the time they're hurting, it's probably too late. Like, it's one of those things where it definitely is something that we need to look into and be mindful of. We do have a comment in the chat says sounds as bad as cops. I heard in our conversation yesterday, we talked about how like Black Lives Matter is not just about the cops. Like,
all of it. It's really about all of it. And being a provider. So I went through the academy in Santa Clara County when I became an EMT, and the experience that I had really opened my eyes up to a lot of things. So we went through the academy, and one of the days of the academy was racial diversity sensitivity training. Sounds great from an HR perspective. Me, happy-go-lucky self, I'm like in the front taking notes, like super excited. Everybody else is behind me. I'm the only person of color in my academy, by the way, too. So I'm over here like, oh, okay, cool, so cool. Looking around, everybody's behind me like, oh, we have to be here. And then the person who came to teach the seminar, he had been in the emergency medical field about 30 or 40 years. He was very vetted, and to be in EMT and in the emergency medical side for that many years, it's a lot because people typically burn out after 10 years. So you're very much so respected in the industry. So what you say carries a lot of weight and a lot of value. So he began to talk, and he's like, okay, guys, he's like, I've been an EMT for the last, I forget if he said 30 or 40 years. He's like, I know what I'm talking about. He's like, the things I'm going to do, we're going to make sure that you make it home safe and that you're safe, and keeping your partner safe is always your number one priority. He was like, this is the things I've compiled over the years. You must follow it. He's like, because if you don't, your life is on the line, and now your partner's life's on the line. And he's like, first, we're going to start off with Black people. He was like, I just want you to know, he's like, all Black people, he's like, they always must be restrained. He's like, they always have knives. He's like, and all of them do heroin. So he's like, you have to pat down their pockets for needles. He's like, just be very careful. And he's like, now we're going to move into, he's like, the Mexicans. He's like, their nerve endings, they're not like regular people's nerve endings. He's like, so if they tell you their pain is a 10 out of 10, he's like, it's actually 1 out of 10. So just don't administer pain medication. And he's like, and when it comes to the Asians, he's like, you just push them aside and you tell them what to do because they think you're stupid anyways. And then he was like, and anybody who's like Muslim or wears the things, he was like, if you're a woman, you need to stay inside. You don't get out of the ambulance out of respect for their culture. And I literally was sitting there like, and I said, what about white people? And he said, what about white people?
right.
And I lost my shit. But behind me, everybody was taking notes. I've seen people take this to heart. And that's the thing where it's like, it comes into ignorance versus racism, because there's some people there that are not racist. They just like genuinely do want to help people. They are like at heart, but then they have this mentality of, oh my gosh, I have to move like this to keep people safe. So they inadvertently start perpetuating the cycle onto their patients. Then on the other hand, no, you for sure have these people who are racist. They exist. They don't care, you know? But it's this group right here of people that like the path to hell is paved with good intentions, where it's like they really do think they're doing something good. They think that they're keeping themselves safe, keeping their partner safe. It comes to that ignorance. And I feel like that is an excuse. on their behalf. But at the same time too, it's like a thing that we need to start understanding and seeing to see how we break down that communication and that cycle. And this is in the Bay Area. So I already know that this is amplified on 10 in other places. So just like from that experience for myself, I was like, yeah, no, this right here, we have to change. This needs to change. This is what's going on. And then in being a provider on the ambulance, I've seen it where patients weren't administered medication because of their race. And then there's a difference between being an EMT and a paramedic. As an EMT, you cannot give medicine. So I was an EMT, I was not in a position to give medicine, versus a paramedic, you can give medicine. So I would see patients who would not get medicine because I know someone's going to say, well, if you saw it, why didn't you give them medicine? So just to let people know. So I would see that, like there was one case, there was actually a shootout that happened at Kaiser Richmond, and I was actually there when the shootout happened. And the victim who got shot by the police, his mom ended up coming to the thing, and there was a riot of people outside. Like they were trying to tear down the gate. Like it was crazy. And his mom actually fainted in the crowd, and like you could see like she really needed help and care. And like people were just kind of like trying to get around her, trying to get inside. And they literally told us, they're like, you cannot go out to give her care. Like, it's not a safe situation. And I was like, yeah, I get it's not a safe situation, but like somebody needs to go and help her. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, no. It took me 45 minutes to figure out a way to get out, to go outside to get the mom, you know? So, and like, she like had a panic attack, was spazzing out. She just really needed like oxygen to regulate her breathing. We got her into the hospital. And it's just situations like that just really show you how broken our system is, where we're losing so much humanity for one another.
Yeah.
And like, I understand the safety stuff behind it too, but it's just like, there's a whole lot in our system, and it's so broken, so broken. But touching on how broken it is, I do want to touch on the empowerment within self too. Just like knowing like you are your own advocate, like you have the power and the tools you need to heal yourself. It really all starts in a mindset. And once you start shifting your mindset, your life will completely shift and ripple out. And as you shift and ripple out, that will affect the lives of everybody you encounter. So I just like also want to touch on that, just because I don't want to be like, yeah, our system's fucked, I don't know how we're going to fix it. Because that's typically what happens with a lot of these conversations. It just becomes an emotional pool of like, we need to do something, but the call to action part gets dropped a lot because it becomes a collective response instead of an individualistic response.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, and the one thing that I have to push on for the audience is, like there is that agency, there's that agency in the personal experience. And also this level of ignorance and insidiousness is what perpetuates the system of racism in every system we're talking about. It's like, yes, there are people who don't know and they're sitting there gullible, just eating it up. And that it's like those people who, again, think they have good intentions. I invite you out there to actually reflect and see, like, if your intentions even matter. Like, I don't care what you intended. Like, you have to be accountable for the impact that is on the other side. And we talk about the accountability process all the time, especially in the world of like sexual assault, you know, like having people be accountable and understanding their actions. Be accountable for your actions on a day-to-day basis. If you don't understand something, if it doesn't make sense, like figure it out. And if you think it makes sense and you see people are hurting, ask yourself. So I really appreciate, you know, you bringing that to light and getting this really present. The trust inside of the medical industry, you know, like, one of the things I wanted to share is about one of my aunts, my great aunt. The American eugenics movement started in the 1920s. And it was this whole conversation of like, are you fit to marry? Which really is, are you fit to procreate? And they forcibly sterilized people who were ethnic, people who were considered mentally ill, which we had a lot of different definitions back then. And all these different disenfranchised people who are in the prison system, all these things forcibly sterilized. And it happened to my aunt when she was 13. She went in for an appendectomy and they tied her tubes. She had no idea. No idea until she couldn't have children some 10, 15 years later.
That's wild. And it's like decisions like that get made for you. It's evil. It's so evil, you know? And it's just like the amount of like malintent behind it. It's crazy. It's crazy. And that's the thing, is like, this is real life, you know? And that's where like the empowering yourself has to be so important, so we don't fall into it, because it becomes a trap of like hopelessness, you know? And as hard as it is not to fall into it, we have to, even when we have situations like this, because it's real. It's very real.
Yeah. So, you know, to your point on, you know, like taking it to the self and having that responsibility and agency, like for people out there listening, like this stuff is happening. So whatever skin you're in, like look at your own personal agency and your individual actions and start there to shift the system.
It has to. And I think like also too, the trust within the medical industry, not to throw shade on the medical industry in any sense of the word, but there is so much that needs to change. In we are doctors, but we are not medical doctors. So the difference between chiropractors and medical doctors is medical doctors prescribe medication. Chiropractors, we believe it. We are very strong in the philosophy of this science, art, and philosophy of chiropractic, of things natural, and the power of the body, that the power that heals the body the power that made the body heals the body. So the schooling and stuff like that's pretty much the same. The first 3 years, the last year they focus on pharmaceuticals. We focus on adjusting and diagnostics. So with being away and outside of the medical model, I think also to the embracement of allied professionals such as chiropractors, acupuncturists, massage therapists are going to be a great way for people of color to start navigating and taking control of their health, because a chiropractor can serve as a as a port of entry provider. So it's like you can see your chiropractor for more than just low back pain. I'm a doctor that works with the nervous system and the musculoskeletal system. I'm specialized in both of those categories. That's what chiropractors focus on. So it's also too of just knowing like there's different options out there that match and meet your philosophy. Because for me, I was actually involved in an accident that almost left me paralyzed, and I did not want to be on opiates, and I did not want surgery. And that's when I found chiropractic, because the philosophy was there where I was like, okay, I just need a toolbox to figure this out, but I'm going to figure it out and like let my body heal itself, because I know how powerful it is. And that's when I got into chiropractic and found that route. But just knowing that there are other providers out there and that you have options, and also too, like, you're the boss of your provider. I think a lot of people forget that. Like, you're paying me for a service. I'm working for you right now, you know? And I think a lot of times people forget that because of the title, but it's like, let's co-collab as a team. But there's sometimes where in your health, you need to take control, because doctors are real people too. Like, we have lives, we got drama in the background, people got kids, family problems, you know, it's providers and doctors burn out too. Yeah. So it's also on you as the patient to be like, yo, you're a little burnt out, or you know what, I feel like you're not giving me the time and attention I deserve that I'm paying you for. And it's also like putting these doctors back in check, humble them, because I've had certain providers where I'm like, I'm gonna humble you right quick, because this is not what I'm paying for. And as a provider myself, it's like, I know the standard and level I have of my patients. I expect them to like the same in return from other providers. And I think patients need to start empowering themselves in that too, where it's like, no, don't get it twisted. Mm-hmm. You got power. And another thing too is like, second opinions are huge. Just because one doctor views something as one opinion, please get a second opinion. Going through diagnostic myself, like, there's so many conditions that mirror one another. So it's like, it's good to have two opinions, you know, and then go from there. And just research from qualified sources, not WebMD. I've had so many people be like, I'm dying. And I'm like, what? WebMD told me. And I'm like, yeah, no, your hips are out of alignment. It's not cancer. You're like, yeah. All the time.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's very real. So talking about like doctors and that whole like having a real life situation, one of my partners, I shared about how when I went to Planned Parenthood, I was having an IUD removed and the woman didn't know how to do it. She just didn't know. So she like rips it out. It's extremely painful. And it was one of those things where I'm like, how do I even articulate this? It's like, I don't want to throw shade on Planned Parenthood. We're not going to do that. What my partner said was that not every doctor is a straight A student. So there is an aspect there of, like you said, like knowing, trusting your provider, understanding like you have the agency because you hired them. Like that is very real.
Like if you're a provider, you can always switch and get a new provider. Like that's something that needs to be normalized too. And I think I had a primary care doctor I had since I was like 15. And just because like I had her for such a long amount of time, I was like, I'm not going to switch providers. But when I was becoming a physiologist, the things that she would tell me and the things I was learning in school just weren't adding up. And then I would check her on it and she'd be like, she could just never give me a straightforward answer. And her like go-to thing was like, I'm just going to give you antibiotics. I'm just going to do this, or we're just going to do that. It was always like a fix with a drug and get me out the door. And I was kind of like, but I really want to understand what's going on and why, not like, and a lot of like the things too were just like little lifestyle changes I ended up having to make that like changed everything. So just things like that. And that's another thing too, is like being a doctor is a very complex thing. Like I for surely was not a straight A student, but my skills when it comes to adjusting are very amazing. So it's like people have like their gifts and their things, but I think it's just like understanding people do have a human experience. And also too, that's why becoming a doctor is difficult. It's like I've had to put in a lot of work to make sure I can maintain myself and maintain my composure, where it's like life does go on, but it's like when I'm present with my patients, I must be present with my patients, but also understanding like I am having a human experience. So it's like there could be a day where it's like I'm off for something, and that's where it's like holding accountability, because that's where you and your doctor, it should be a teamwork. It should be a partnership where it's like, okay, it's more than just the one thing. So I think that's like something else to like also consider too. But also too, like there are people, and I understand where it's like, I shouldn't have to be doing all these things, and and it's like, I agree, we really shouldn't have to, but this is the reality of how things are. So it just kind of becomes, it is what it is situation.
Yeah. This question in the chat really hits me. When did people begin to act like their doctor is God? And I really want you to answer that, but I must say, I had, and sometimes still have, a lot of fear going to see the doctor. Like I freeze up. I don't know what to say. Again, like they're the doctor, they know more, like I should listen. And there's all these different psychological things that are present in me. That I can honestly, I'm like, yeah, those are some micro traumas. Those are some traumas coming up. Okay. But yeah, like.
No, I do too. And then honestly, for me, when I go to the medical doctors, like urgent care, like the emergency room and stuff like that, I still feel the same way. I still feel that way. When I go see like my colleagues in the chiropractic profession, I've never, ever once had that feeling before too. So I think that's like also another thing where it's like understanding there's different avenues out there. And also too, chiropractic is a profession about physical touch. And like when I tore my Achilles and my ankle, I was 15. I got 2 injections into my ankle. They almost did surgery on it. And the doctor never once touched my foot. Didn't even look at it. He was like, oh, your range of motion is a little decreased. I ended up not getting the surgery, but now with like the knowledge I have, like I just had a really bad like strain, freaking wild. But it just really comes down to like, I think the intention behind everything is so important. And that's where it really shows. The intention in chiropractic is truly the empowerment of the body, versus the intention of the medical profession is financial capital gain for the pharmaceutical companies. And that's another thing too, where it's like, we have to remember, the pharmaceutical companies are the pimps of the pimps. Let me tell you, it's $1 trillion industry. Their agenda is getting paid, which is getting you on pharmaceuticals. There's certain medications that are life-saving that we need, that of Cool. Yes. But there's certain medications where it's like, okay, if we just do some lifestyle changes, you would never need that. And that's where chiropractic comes in, because we aren't funded by the pharmaceutical company. Chiropractors are typically small business owners that their main income just comes from their practice. So it's a whole different vibe and environment when it's you have a doctor that has the power to run their clinic how they want to, versus in the medical industry, the pharmaceutical companies decide how people practice because those are the policies and procedures put into play. So it becomes a whole different experience when you go see your chiropractor versus when you go see your medical doctor. They both should be on your team. They both need to be players on your team. You should have a healthcare team, not just one provider, a team is like huge. So just understanding like there is the importance of both, but just understanding intention and understanding value, I think is really important, especially like where's the value in my health coming down from this provider right now?
Yeah. You know, I love what you said about the yummy holistic, like it's about touch, and it's completely accurate. Like I go see my massage therapist, I go see my chiropractor. I don't feel that fear. I don't feel that concern or that edginess. And talking about the pharmaceutical companies, the goal is not to cure you. Like it's keeping you on long-term treatment medication. And so again, there are a bunch of cures out there that are not accessible or provided to people of color, low income people. Like there's a class thing, there's an elitism, there's so many layers to this. And like, yeah, if you can't afford insurance, then you're not like the whole pharmaceutical chain, you know, it's like the insurance, the medical care, like all these different things that are feeding into each other financially.
And that's where like it really does come down to an economic factor for a lot of people. And then that's where chiropractic care is so important, because it is something affordable, and in the long run, it's going to save you money on your healthcare overall, because chiropractors are doctors of the nervous system. They specialize in the nervous and the musculoskeletal system. Your brain is your master communicating organ for your whole body. Your brain transmits its signals down the spinal cord, and we have peripheral nerves that exit each segment of the spine. These peripheral nerves all go to their different corresponding targets, being the skin, organ, and muscles. However, through life, we shift these bones out of alignment, and chiropractic, that's known as the subluxation. When we shift those bones out of alignment, that actually puts pressure on the nerves, which means the communication from the brain to its target has become decreased. Through specific chiropractic assessments, we're able to adjust these areas of misalignment to restore communication, so the brain and body can begin to function again and have communication, or not function, but begin to communicate at 100%. So when your body is able to communicate at 100%, you're not going to have disease. You're not going to have different pathologies within your body. And that's what Hippocrates talked about. All roots of disease come from the spine. So it's like any relationship. If you're able to communicate at 100%, things are going to be straight. But if your brain and your body can't communicate, it's not going to work out. And I think a great example is we had a type 1 diabetic patient. They had diabetes since they were 3 years old. They were skinny. He exercised every day. He was a CEO. He had his private chef. He had 3 assistants. He lived a very stress-free life. However, he could never get his A1Cs levels to regulate. He came into the office to get chiropractic care. We took x-rays. The vertebra, it's T11, what goes to your pancreas, was actually out of alignment. After we restored alignment back into that area of the spine, his A1C levels regulated for the first time in his life, and he's in his 40s. So it's not curing the diabetes, but it's allowing that communication to be restored. So there's so much power and potential that can come from an adjustment besides just the low back pain. So just like understanding that, like, your health, you can take different avenues to heal yourself and see what's going on. And with the amount of stress reduction that comes from the system in chiropractic, it's huge, because what causes a subluxation are the 3 T's, what are thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And in our life, we can all ascribe to that. Thoughts, they actually cause different chemical reactions within our body. And with a chemical reaction being bigger than what we can tolerate, within a certain amount of time, our body's so smart and a self-preserving organism, it actually takes that emotion and puts it within the system through a hormone response. And those different hormones will go to different organs or muscles within the body, what will cause the bones to move. And then on top of that, we have toxins. Toxins come from our food, from our environment, especially sugar. Sugar actually does make the neck muscles spasm, which can cause a lot of misalignments within the neck. And then the last one being trauma. And trauma doesn't just have to be a car accident or a large injury. If you're working, picking up boxes all day, that's a micro trauma on your low back daily. So the 3 T's are what cause subluxation. So us just having a human experience, we're going to go through life losing some communication along the way. And it's about getting realigned to restore the communication, clear the disease out the body, stay empowered within self, and never needing to go on the pharmaceuticals anyways, because they ain't made for us anywho. But
yes. I want to point out there's a couple correlations I just made. There's the insurance and the trust factor. Mm-hmm. And I often see things like chiropractic and acupuncture fall into the category of that's white people shit. Like, that's not something I do. I don't like people of color, don't trust the medical industry, may not have insurance. And the fact that most insurance doesn't even cover chiropractic and acupuncture.
They mostly don't, unless you have PPO. And even then, hopefully it's a nice plan.
Right. Yeah. So there is systems that are actually keeping us away from this holistic medicine, this preventative care. There was a thing that we talked about in our other conversation around indigenous medicine and like these things that are actually going to help us or can help us that, again, we consider as white people shit because
we've been decolonized and stripped from it. And especially like being in America, if you are of indigenous or Black roots, like we did have our culture stripped from us. So it does take like the know thyself. It's hard to know thyself when you have such a large part of your identity taken from you. And then we have this new wave of wellness and vibes and all these things coming in, and the forefront of it is Caucasian dominated. So it kind of correlates. Like for me, I got into a really bad accident that left me paralyzed from the knee down on the left side. And I was bedridden for about a year, and I was trying to think of different like things to do. And people like, I had a few different people say like, oh, why don't you try chiropractic? Why don't you try chiropractic? And I was like, yeah, that's for real. Some like white people shit. Like I need a real solution. Like I don't need to go align my chakras. Like I need some, and really I did need to go align my chakras, but like learning and getting into it, that's when I was like, wow. I actually partnered with this yoga instructor here in Bay Area. Her name is Lady Namastizzle. You guys need to check her out. She's amazing. But that what I so much appreciated about her is she's a Black yoga instructor. She's also a Ganja yoga instructor, the only Black Ganja yoga instructor in the Bay. So super amazing, super phenomenal. But we led an event last year, and when we did the meditation and the yoga event, she's really big on decolonizing. And she was like, she gave a whole talk beforehand, and she was like, I want everybody to know that yoga actually comes from Africa. It came from Kenya. This is our people who created this. She's like, it didn't come from a different culture. It came out of Africa. And then when you have like we have to give respect being on a lonely land, or me being on a lonely land in San Francisco, like the indigenous people that came before me left the herbs here to heal the land. And that's where a lot of indigenous cultures will burn the sage and burn the palo santo, because that's what our ancestors left to communicate with us, but also clear the environment, clear the energy. So you're truly understanding that it might be a fad now, but where the original roots came from, they came from us. And that's where the empowerment comes from too, is the more we understand how great our people were, or are, not were, but are, it's so empowering itself. And for me, I remember in 3rd grade, I went to a all-white school, and I remember we were learning about different history. And I remember I rose my hand one day and I asked the professor, like, when are we going to learn like my people's history? And she was like, I'm sorry, but your people never did great things. And I closed the book and I was like, I came from kings and queens. So I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I walked out the room in 3rd grade. I just knew inside that there was something deeper than that. And I think that's like also just really understanding like who our ancestors are, where our lineage come from, and like understanding the healing within those lineages is huge. And like ceremonies are huge. Finding your ritual and your routine that's tailored to yourself. And wellness is a personal and individualistic journey. And I feel like the healthcare model makes it a one size fit all. And it really isn't. So I think that's where the empowerment of self comes in, because the more you know yourself, the more you understand what your needs are, so you can make sure your needs are met.
Yeah. That point that you made about being in the third grade and the teacher saying what she said, that ties me back also into the training for the EMTs and just acknowledging how much of a white normative society we live in. Like, yeah. So go ahead.
I was just agreeing, like, huge. That's like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it is. And it's like, it's not, when you can't see the water you swim in. So I'd have this experience out there that, like, when people are like, oh, that's normal. Like, you know, what about the image? How do we treat white people? Oh, like, don't worry about them. That's a normalized perspective on how the world is supposed to be. So it shows up in the media, it shows up in the education system, especially. And it's how our brains are developed. So when you're only teaching specific sides of culture, specific sides of information, that's normative to that culture, making it normative to everybody. And in this scenario, it's white normativity.
And it won't be for long, because 2050, it's a new minority coming to the block. So
oh my God, yes. And I definitely, I have to say this because it's been coming up a bunch. That term minority, it represents less important. You know, it's like, these are a less important group of people, not a lesser in number. And yeah, we can have the statistics of what we mean here in the US, but that concept, that construct is everywhere. So really looking at it, like, one of the things I like is marginalized communities, but also like,
it's the wording for me where I don't like it. And then also too, it's become a thing where person of color has been synonymous with low income.
right.
That needs to change, because ain't nothing low income about me, baby. Let me tell you, you know? But it's just like this whole little thing that becomes like this synonymous thing. And I think people have become so obsessed with labels in our culture that it's become counterproductive, where it's just like, we have to find a label for this and we have to find a label for that. And like, I'm from San Francisco. I feel like I try my best to be as politically correct as I can. And I feel like I can't keep up.
Oh yeah. Mm-mm. No.
Like, there's another new, okay. And it's like, I want to like express it and then be right. And then you try, and then it's like, wait, you didn't know the new one it's like, right. Society are a huge thing, but no, I agree with you. It's like also too, like, it comes back to the power of intention because of how we are treated in America. And then now the numbers and calculations are changing, where it's like, now we're a majority, but we're still treated like the minority. So, right.
And, yeah. You know, the other experience I have is being all lumped together. You know, like, there's this identity politics conversation that's going on where people of color get renamed like every 20 to 50 years. And it keeps us separate in thought. It keeps us in these different places. And there's not really a way to keep up to be politically correct around it. And I wholeheartedly agree about people of color being synonymous with lack of money. One of the things that I see in this diversity conversation is that, like, it keeps trying to be fixed by throwing money on it. And that doesn't take into account the underlying systems and structures and thought patterns that are there that actually are offensive and do create that distance and separation. So yeah, we definitely have to stop that conversation. It's disrespectful.
It is.
Yeah. So, okay. We got to talk about the indigenous stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the resources that you have, some information about your practice and where people can find you.
Yeah. So my wellness brand is IWokeWellness. We're in 4 stores in San Francisco. The pop-up shop SF. We are in the Higher Consciousness and the Hate. We are in the Function Chiropractic in Hayward, and then we are moving into another chiropractic office down in San Jose. But you can also find us online. I have one of my products right here. This is Lemony Fresh. Lemony Fresh was actually one of the first products I created. It's a natural and organic air freshener, but it's also a cannabis odorizer. So the concoction of essential oils in here actually eat the cannabis odor out of the smell. I smoke in my car, and you can never tell. We have a bunch of other aromatherapy products such as vibe setting sprays and essential oil rollers, as scent is the fastest way to trick your brain into whatever state you want to be in. My practice will be opening up shortly in San Francisco, so stay tuned for that. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram at dr.day __. And that's me on Instagram, Twitter, also Apple Music and Spotify. My new single Trap Child dropped today, so please make sure to go check it out. The music video is about to be out today. It's just taking a really long time to load on YouTube, but hey, you live and you learn. So Trap Child definitely dropped. You can find me on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the streaming platforms at dr.day. And make sure to check us out. And I do a podcast called Weed Wednesdays on Wednesdays. We also have an underground artist show that we do and a bunch of other dope projects. If you are in the LA area, make sure to pull up to Black on the Block at Wisdom. I will be there this Sunday vending. And if you are in San Francisco Saturday, we're going to have the Woo Wop at 351 9th Street. It's going to be a huge party, so much fun. There's going to be some special guest performances will be nice to tune into. And then Sunday we'll be at Black on the Block. So you can find me at IWokeWellness, and it's just the letter IWOKE Wellness on Instagram or online at iwokewellness.com. You can find my personal page on Instagram at dr.day __.
Awesome. Multifaceted, multi-talented Dr. Day. I love it. Definitely going to have to check out the podcast and get some of that spray. So, okay. So we, it's dr.day __. I just seen somebody put it in the chat. Yes. And we'll also get the links to the resources that you recommend. There is one thing that you shared that the acronyms, LACA, ABCA, SABCA.
So in chiropractic school, I actually started 3 different organizations. The one I started was Alpha Chiro. It's a sorority that's focused on promoting diversity within chiropractic and community service. The next one, I brought the student chapter to the school, what was SABCA, with Student American Black Chiropractic Association. And then the last one is LACA. And then we created the first student chapter, which is the Latin American Chiropractic Organization. And that's actually international. So it connects chiropractors through all of Latin America and in the United States as well. So we've created the first student chapter, and it was just different ways that we can start getting people of color within the profession to start having these conversations, but creating actual change behind it. Also helping people learn Spanish for LACA, and then with chiropractic, just increasing the diversity. So with LACA and SABCA, we've been able to increase the numbers at the chiropractic school I attended, and just hopes to keep promoting the profession and just getting more people in, because it's so important. It's really important. My cousin is actually a chiropractor, and he's from my Jamaican side of the family. When our family came up from LA, our niece and nephew, my cousin adjusted me, then my niece and nephew jumped on the table right after, and they were setting up on each other. And I looked, I was like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we want to be like you, auntie. We want to be like our uncle too. And just like ran off. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, it says Soy de Enero, IWokeWellness. It's IWokeWellness. The Soy de Enero, I changed it to dr.day. I'm sorry, guys. My assistant sent my old bio, not the most recent one. I realized, my bad.
Got it. So sorry for all of the, but we'll totally get that worked out. And yeah, I completely agree. Having more people of color, more diverse minds inside of the medical field that are looking out for people of color and really creating that responsibility, accountability for how people are being treated. I want to thank you for your work and your activism and everything that you've done in the world. It's very powerful and it's very necessary.
Thank you. Just hope to keep on doing it and just getting more people into the collective, getting people to get adjusted and just trying different things out, just finding the ways that empower you. I also do wellness workshops, what I forgot to mention earlier, but just tune into the IWokeWellness page as we start promoting them. But we do different workshops. And then on the Dr. Day page, I do meditation Mondays, every Monday at 6 a.m., where I do a live guided meditation. So those are just like small things that you can add into your toolbox just to help everything along the way too.
Nice. Definitely, everyone, check out those shows. We'll get the links out to you. And Dr. Day, thank you. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. I hope everybody has a blessed Friday.
Yes. And everyone out there, thank you for joining us today. The ITCast is our community outreach podcast that aims to increase diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Did that today. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This weekend, we have Love Skills, and in March, we have The Healing Power of Touch coming back for you. Please support the ITCast and all of the work we do by visiting theitcast.com, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and share with your community. Thank you, and we will see you here next week.